while we were at youth camp, God just touched her heart, and I want her to bless you guys with what God's laid on her heart tonight. Oh, well, I was going to play a game first, but nobody wanted to eat pickled eggs.
No. I'm not gonna eat pickled eggs.
Oklahoma, that was Oklahoma Energy soccer team. They called me. They want me to come play for them. That's our professional soccer team for the state of Oklahoma.
Once you play?
Yeah, they want me to come play.
Really? You play soccer?
You gotta have a laugh.
I didn't know
That's
that.
the best medicine in the world.
It's like the third time they called me today.
Okay?
First time and the second time they're calling me about the
Mommy,
coming to
look
soccer
at her.
games. They get big discounts for their soccer games.
You need to stay over there, okay?
Let Mommy talk to us.
And you can turn the mic closer if you want to.
I am. I'm very nervous. I'm not a public speaker.
You
At
say
all.
public, it's church.
I know.
The boys.
We could be sitting
a
around in
public
my
church,
living room
though.
and I'd be fine. I could talk to anybody, say anything, but
Well,
And
I
like
guess we
this
gotta drive to
kinda-
Miss Sherry's
This is
house real
God's
quick.
house.
You know, we'll be right
there
back.
you go.
We're going to her house.
Exactly.
We're bringing your living room here.
Just pretend like we'll be right back and you're talking to me.
Sure, okay. I'm really not sure where to start. I think I probably need to give you guys a little bit of background information on how I got to where I am. I was raised in church. Somewhere in the dark recesses of my mom's photo album is a picture of me about 2 weeks old, sitting, her holding me in front of our church that I grew up in. I grew up in a Baptist church, which in and of itself can be interesting. And I grew up going to church. When my mom couldn't take us, I went with my grandma and grandpa. I was real close to them growing up. They had a huge impact on my life. And I was very consistent and went to church pretty much every Sunday until I was about 13. At 13, my grandma died. My grandma was my best friend. She had a lot of health problems and she couldn't see. I was her eyes. And we were practically inseparable. And when that happened, it completely and totally devastated me. I had Sunday school teachers around the time I was about 11 or 12 talking to me about being saved and being baptized and all that kind of stuff. And I had reached the decision that I was going to wait until I truly knew in my heart that I knew what it meant and that I was making that decision because it was my decision, not because I felt I needed to do it to please somebody else. So when my grandma died, I moved away from church. I got mad, really mad, because I couldn't understand why, when this was my best friend, the anchor in my life were my grandparents, and why he would take her from me at an age that I really needed her most. And so from about 13 till I was probably about 17 or 18, my senior year of high school, it was kind of hit and miss. If my aunts or somebody would come along and take me to Sunday school or church, I'd go. But it wasn't anything that I worked real hard at. And then my senior year, just between my junior and senior year of high school, had a lot of family problems with my mom and dad. My dad had always had some anger issues and wasn't always the best to us or my mom. Whenever I hit 17, I realized my grades were so far behind. If I didn't do something, I would not be able to graduate. My grades were not high enough, and I did not have enough credits to graduate high school if I didn't get it together and get something done. So I left home. My mom, it wasn't mad. I didn't run away. I sat down and talked to my mom. She understood my decision, and I tried to respect hers, although I didn't completely understand it at the time. And I moved in with my aunt. One of the two conditions that my aunt had for me to move in with her was that I would go to church and I would finish high school and I would graduate with my high school diploma. That's all she asked of me. I was working, did a lot of babysitting, had a steady income coming in, so I had my own money. And I was able to stay with her and finish out my senior year of high school. I worked hard enough and was able to bring my grade point average up high enough that I had enough credits to graduate. During the time that I was living with her, I was going to Sunday school every Sunday morning, going to church on Sunday nights. And when I wasn't working, I would go on Wednesday nights. And during that time, I had a really amazing youth leader that led me to make the decision that I was ready to be baptized and commit myself to God, to Christ. And that worked out great. I became more involved in my church at the time. I was a GA leader at the time. I don't know if you guys probably don't hear much about GAs, but
What's that?
it was, GAs is short for Girls Auxiliary. It was like a group, a Bible study group more or less, an activity group for girls from, I think 7 to 12 was the age group on that.
I went to something in the Baptist, and I forget what it is.
That's probably what it was.
Youth group.
Yeah. And I became a GA leader and was a big influence in young girls' lives. Right out of high school, I became a nanny. I was working for an attorney out of Oklahoma City that has a child with special needs. And I knew that that was a big impact on my life, and I had a big impact on theirs. And I was very responsible. I took my responsibility seriously. You know, you hear, not to say anything bad or anything, is not what I'm meaning by it, but you know, you've heard people get up here and tell you, well, I was drinking in high school, I was running around crazy, I was, you know, doing drugs or experimenting with drugs, things like that. I never did. I didn't do that. And it made people think of me a little bit different, like I was a goody two-shoes, too good to hang out with sometimes. You know, things like that, because I took my responsibilities. You guys have said that about people, haven't you? Anyway, I took my responsibilities very seriously because I knew that my respect for the people I influenced and their respect for me meant a lot to me. And I never really had any serious issues until I hit my 20s. About the time I hit 25, 26, I kind of got tired of being good all the time. You know, if any of you are familiar with the Baptist churches, and I know I've heard Kelly say it,
Yeah.
Baptists don't dance. I've always loved to dance.
Oh, yes.
And before I did it, I talked to my mom, because my mom was my go-to person. I talked to my mom, Mom, I really want to learn to dance. What's God going to think about that? Am I going to be letting him down or doing something I shouldn't be doing because I want to learn to dance? That's how, I don't know the right word to use. That's how strict I felt the Bible was in the context it was taught to me growing up. And so I started taking dance lessons. Well, I'm sure most of you know, only place you can go dancing around here is at a bar or in a club somewhere.
They go to Grant.
So I kind of got sucked into that because it was so much fun. I wasn't one of those that would go out and just drink till I got falling down drunk all the time. But I'd go out, have a couple beers, you know, and dance. I love to dance. And so I kind of drew away from church at that time because I didn't feel like I was living up to God's expectations. And then you know, one bad boyfriend after another. In between, I had met this guy that was a really amazing friend to me. That's all he was in the beginning. We were friends for over 7 years. And he said, you know, you've got to get out of there. You've got to stop doing that. You're continuing to make the same bad decisions, one right after the other. He says to me, I've got a 2-bedroom apartment. I have a roommate that's supposed to be moving in. This was along in May and June of 2002. He says, I've got a roommate that's supposed to be moving in, but he won't be available to move in until the end of August, 1st of September. You come stay here till you get on your feet, get a job, get a new start, leave that behind you. And I was like, I thought about it. I prayed about it. And I was trying to make the right decision. So I did. I moved to Colorado, a little town or suburb of Denver called Westminster. And after I'd been up there about a year, Brian's my friend, Brian approached me and we started talking about trying to have a dating relationship. From the time I met him, he was not interested in a relationship. He was not interested in dating. He was a very business, very professional type guy. His idea, his goal in life was to be successful, and once he became successful and had built up enough money, then he would look into a relationship, a dating, and going forward. I respected that. He became one of my best friends in the world. So we had been dating I'd been up there a year and we had started dating, and we had been dating just under a year, and he was diagnosed with cancer.
Oh, no.
Brian was raised and grew up in a very strict Lutheran church environment. One of the things he asked me whenever that happened was if I would go to church with him. And I was like, well, yeah, I had been looking for a church anyway, just never found my fit. So he found one and we started going. Before I would commit to going to church with him, again, I'm on the phone with my mom. Mom, what would Grandma think if I went to Lutheran church? I was raised Baptist, Mom. What's Grandma going to think if I go to a Lutheran church? Because a lot of denominations want you to believe their way of doing it is the only way and the only right way. And that's not right. That's not true. The only way is what the Bible says. The right way is what the Bible says. And so I started going to Lutheran church with him. And when he got the final diagnosis, he was stage 4. Which some of you have dealt with cancer. I'm sure you know stage 4 is kind of the end of the line, basically. They gave him originally about 6 months. So we sat down and we talked about it. He said, you know, I understand if you don't want to go through this with me. I understand. He said, you know, we've known each other a long time, but we've only been dating a short time. It's okay. I understand. You don't have to be here and go through this with me. And the thought of walking away never even crossed my mind. During that time, we had started a Bible study group. I was growing closer to God. I was renewing my commitment, my relationship with God. And I felt that's where I needed to be. I needed to be there with Brian. Brian was a health nut. Never been sick from the time he was a little boy up until that point. Never been to a doctor. Scared to death of doctors. He only went to the doctor because I told him I was going to make the appointment, tie him up, and drag him there myself if he did not go willingly. Because he developed this purple spot right here on his cheek. And it just continued to grow and didn't get any better. Originally, they thought it was maybe a spider bite, some kind of an infection. And after the antibiotics didn't work on that, they did a biopsy and found out it was, I'm really horrible at saying this because I never know the right way to say it, an adenocarcinoma, which is a form of head and neck cancer and very, very, very hard to treat. And so he went in and decided he'd go through the chemo and go through the radiation, because they gave him a 25 to 45% chance that it would reduce the tumor enough that they could go in and remove it. At the end of the radiation and the chemo treatments, it had spread into, they found spots on his lower back. And while the initial site had shrunk some, it spread. So then they gave him the option of going through more chemo and more radiation. The chemo and radiation tore him up so bad, he did not want to go through it again. So he started researching alternative cancer treatments, which are natural treatments, very effective for a lot of cancers. There's a clinic down in Mexico. Whenever he decided that, we did a tour of clinics, most of them were in Mexico, that did alternative treatments. And we chose one, the Hope for Cancer Institute in Tijuana, Mexico. Dr. Tony Jimenez is the main doctor there, and he was very good to us when we first met him. And we just both got a good feel for the clinic and for the doctor and the doctor's wife, that he made the decision to go. Initially, it was a 3-week session, and then he was back home for home treatments. And then when he decided the home treatments weren't enough, he needed to be closer to do a more intense treatment, we moved to Mexico for 6 months so that he could be, we were literally like 3 blocks from the clinic. And we lived in Mexico for 6 months. When we moved back over into San Diego, I went to work, got a job, so we have steady money coming in. And during the time we were in Mexico, we became involved with a church out there that was a non-denominational church. That was my first experience with a non-denominational church that just preached the Bible. Let God move them, let God speak to them. And we met some amazing people through that church, which helped me to strengthen my trust in God and my beliefs, and moving me back to the path towards God where I needed to be to get Brian through what he was going through. As he was, after we moved back over into San Diego, he wasn't able to get across the border into Mexico as much. And so it got worse and started really taking its toll on mostly his upper body. So he decided to go through the University of San Diego, and we went through the one that's in La Jolla, California, and did some clinical trials. Those didn't work. I actually made a couple of trips to Moscow, Russia, to bring back medications that helped him. It helped restore his energy and his health and everything so that he could at least have the energy to fight. And it did help shrink the tumor. And then he just gradually got worse and worse. In around in December 2005, we were in the emergency room and in the hospital at least once a month because he couldn't breathe, or he couldn't eat, or he couldn't
dehydrate.
And so about once a month we were in the hospital. After each hospital stay, he'd get better, and then we'd backslide at least 2 steps. And one of the things that, when you guys really know me, you'll know that I feel guilty a lot. I blame myself for a lot of things. I blame myself if somebody's upset. I blame myself if things don't go right. I blame myself. I carry the load, I bear the guilt. And one of the hardest things that I've ever done in my life was what I did just before Brian passed away. I pleaded with God. I said, God, we're doing all we can to make him better. If you're not going to heal him, please take him so he does not suffer anymore.
Yes.
Those were my words. If you're not going to heal him so he can be the man he once was, then take him. Take him home to be with you so that he's not suffering here anymore, because he had lost everything that he was. He was a very vibrant, very
Outgoing.
buoyant, very outspoken kind of guy. And he had just shrunk down to almost nothing. He went from he was 6'3" and weighed, was it 350 pounds? And he went from 350 pounds to being down to fluctuating between 135 and 138 pounds before he passed away. And I did. I just broke down and I said, you know, if you're not going to heal him, take him. And it wasn't but a short time after that he passed away, May 1st, 2006. Second hardest thing I ever had to do was kneeling down beside him, trying to resuscitate him, begging him to hang on. But knowing that he was gone and he was in a better place. And I've carried that guilt with me for a long time because I felt like it was my fault that he died. I asked God to take him. That I said, just take him. And the people that we had joined a Bible study with and everything talked to me, tried to get me through it. Tried to tell me that, you know, God was just waiting for me to accept what was going to happen because I had walked that walk with Brian. I had been there. I went through it all with him from the day he was diagnosed until the day he passed away. I never left his side. I gave up my job. I took time off work to sit with him while he went through chemo and radiation. I rearranged my work schedules. I never left his side. I was right there with him every step of the way. And so a part of me wanted to stay in San Diego. My family here, you need us. We need to be there for you. We need you to come back to Oklahoma. We need you to come home. So I did. And during that time, I strayed again. I knew he was in a better place. I never stopped praying. I never stopped talking to God. I never stopped believing in God or what he had done or what he meant to me. But I stopped going to church again. I stopped attending regular services. I kind of stepped away from that aspect. And then after I found out I was going to have Tegan, I knew I needed to get him into church, that he needed to be raised in a Christian environment. And that's when we started coming here.
How about
In-
Stan?
In 2000, I met Stan in 2008.
Okay,
We had Tegan in 2009.
okay.
And then we've been coming here to go through Cowboy Church about 3 years. And most of you know I'm the secretary. I do the secretary stuff. The website, the uploading of the videos and the flyers and all the printed stuff you guys see, and handle all that. And so I've been involved here, but not as involved as I needed to be. And when we went to camp, I knew that God was working in me. I knew that he wanted me to do more. Those of you that were there saw how hard a time I have walking sometimes. I have a bad back.
You did a lot better than you did last year.
I did, and that was my goal.
Great.
I did a lot better, but I still need to do even better than that. I need to do even better. And so the first night we were there, and you guys were deaf, but the arena, yes, thank you. The arena, I couldn't walk that. I had driven it earlier in the day, and I knew with nowhere to stop and rest in between, I wouldn't be able to make it. And I think one of you asked me if I was okay, and I said yes. I might drop, but I'm not going to drop dead. Because all it does is just, whenever the pain gets so bad,
Yeah.
it like clenches off my back and my ability to move. And I just can't go any further. If I can sit and rest for a couple minutes, I can get up and go further, as long as there's somewhere to stop and rest in between and sit down. And so that really upset me that I could not go with you guys down to the arena the first night. And I sat there and I prayed and I talked to God, and that's when he started working in me on our camp. The next night, the pastor talked and said the sinner's prayer that Kelly's always talking about, and I said that in my heart. And I didn't want to make anything public at camp because I wanted it to be about you guys. I wanted it to be about the youth. I didn't want it to be about me. I wanted the focus on you guys. So I struggled. Hush.
Oh,
He's fine.
you want mommy? There she is.
Shh. But I wanted it to be about you. So I sat there, and even God was saying, you need to make this public. You need to not let somebody know the decision that I've placed in your heart and that you need to make. And I was like, no, I'll talk to Kelly when we get back from camp. I don't want to interfere with the youth. The next night we're sitting there, same thing happened. And then that's when I said, I was sitting there and the band was playing a song that I remember hearing my grandma sing as I sat beside her in church. And I was sitting there praying and talking to God, and I had my head bowed, and I just kind of looked over and had this vision of my grandma kneeling beside me in tears, singing the song. And so I knew at that moment that he was really, Kelly talks about being poked in the chest. He didn't poke me in the chest. He smacked me right upside the head and said, you need to talk to somebody and let them know. And then that's when I got up and let Kelly know that I had rededicated my life to Christ, and that God was leading me in a direction to where I needed to be. That he needed me to do more and to be more, and that I need to be a good example for Tegan, and not just behind the scenes stuff, but right out front, taking it on the front line instead of behind the scenes. And that's what I told Kelly. And I told him, I said, if you want me to share this with the kids anytime, let me know. I was hoping he'd forget, to be honest, but he didn't.
But you're doing great.
Here I am.
Yes.
Because I'm not a public speaker. I don't really know how to talk to people except one-on-one or in a small group. So this is good. But what I'm trying to say is, don't give up. Don't.
You know how many people I was trying to get to come to church this week?
How many?
I had everybody asking people to come to church.
Really?
Yeah, just everybody. I was trying to get all kinds of people to come to church today, but not a lot of people showed up, so you
That's
got lucky.
Okay. I did, didn't I? But I'm not a preacher. I'm not going to judge you. I've made mistakes. I made my own mistakes. I've had my own downfalls. I've been close to God and I've slipped. And you can, as long as you accept him and ask him into your heart, and you're serious, and he's speaking to you, you can go back anytime. He's there waiting for you, right where you left him. And I wanted to share this verse with you. It came up in one of Kelly's sermons on Sunday. He didn't mention this verse, but it was in part of the text he was preaching from. And it says, it's 1 Timothy 4:12. Do not let anyone look down on you because you are young, but be an example for the believers in your speech, your conduct, your love, your faith, and your purity. You're never too young to set an example for someone else.
Amen.
You're never too young to have an influence and talk to someone about God or Jesus or your commitment to him. You're never too young. I grew up in a lot of ways being told, you can't do that, you're a girl. You can't do that, you're not old enough. You can't do that because of this. You can't do that because of that. And I've carried that a lot too. And I finally realized I can do anything I want to. I just have to know that my commitment to God is strong, that he's with me, and what I'm doing is pleasing him. One of the things that has happened since we've been back from camp, I've not been as stressed out. My back hasn't been hurting me as bad. I've been able to get more accomplished. I've not been as argumentative and touchy as I had been for a while, because I made that commitment and I knew he was with me. And I knew he was going to start making things better. I know I still have a long way to go, and I know I have a lot of things to do to prove myself. But I know I'm on the right track. And I just don't want to see you guys giving up. I know some of you made decisions at camp. I've heard some of you talk about wanting to do things within the church. Do it. Follow through with it. You know, if Kelly doesn't bring it back up, go back to him. You know, get your plan of action in place. I want to do this on this day. Does that work out? I want to do, if not, then this, or just have a plan of action and follow through with it. And you'll be amazed at how much better your life is and how much smoother things go. Thank you guys for listening.
That one